welcome everyone. Who's for the first time here at the project? Ah, interesting. Okay, good. Okay, so my name is Stefan. I'm working on the Spring Framework team. It's been 10 years now. It's been a lot of fun. It's the evening, so I have like a lot of slides ready for you. Nothing like a good slide deck with fat text to make you happy. So let's get to it. So I have an app, and we're going to upgrade this app and play with it. And while we're doing so, we'll discover new features. Hopefully, you'll discover new features, and then you can perhaps adapt that to your own use cases, or it might give you some ideas. Let's have a quick poll first. Who's not using Spring Boot? Not. Okay, there's 2 hands. Okay. So those of you who are using Spring Boot, raise your hand if you're still using Spring Boot 2 in some capacity. Okay, that's quite a bit. Okay. And if you're using Spring Boot 2, are you still using Java 8? Okay, it's just, there is 1 hand and then it quickly like, yeah, okay, good. Right, so I forgot already. Okay, most of you are using Spring Boot 3, I gather, right? Okay. Good. All right. So I have an app. Let's start the app. It doesn't work. Okay. It's saying connection refused, and it's trying to connect to something. Okay, good. All right. So let's have a look to the README. Whoa. How to run this application locally, you need to run PostgreSQL. Okay. And it says you need a default password secret. Sign your friendly project team. That's not very friendly, but whatever. Okay, so I need a database. By the way, let me try to quickly see if the test run before I do that, because I have tests, of course. Okay, they do. They run. And there is someone already coming in the front because it's too small. You should not do that, actually. You should come in front right at the beginning. But also you should tell me because it's very clear on my end. So I don't have like the muscle memory to increase the font. But I will increase the font.
In fact, it was boring. I was
Okay, go ahead. That was fast.
No, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So I have my test running there, albeit not having a database apparently. If I look here, I don't have anything. So let's have a look to running a database. Okay, so I'm running a database locally. It's not great, but okay, we'll see after that. And let's start the app and see what it looks like. Okay, so the app is just picture this because it's not like it's all pretending, right? But it's more of a way to look at the features with like a dumb application. So imagine that it's your regular status page where we look at a number of components, making sure they're up and running, and if they're not up and running, we'll report it. There's a way to report incidents and maintenance and past incidents. We also have an API, so it's really about like your high traffic website where it needs to provide information, even like in difficult situations. We can see that everything is down, and the reason everything is down is because locally I need to run an extra application that will provide the marks. So it's an app that I run to provide status about those services, and it may take a while depending on the situation. So if I update, it's up and running, right? Someone is born already? No. Oh, okay. You need. No, see. Okay. So I have an app. By the way, we didn't really look at the app, but it's like running 2.7 still, and it's giving me a warning about apparently I'm using a too recent PostgreSQL database, and that can happen when you lag a bit behind, you'll upgrade your technical stack, but you're still using an older framework version. That can happen because we won't like upgrade to the latest and greatest flyway in a maintenance release, right? So you need also to upgrade Spring Boot itself to benefit from those newer versions. So let's do that maybe. Let's start with that, okay? So I have this 2.7 app. It's hopefully running on 17 already. I don't have a lot of warnings there because except the flyway one that I showed you, the rest seems legit. I have my test case running. If I look at my configuration thingy over here, I don't have like any deprecated property usage. So it's all kind of things that you need to take care of before upgrading, right? Do not upgrade Java and Spring Boot at the same time. Do not upgrade a code base where you have like a bunch of deprecation. It's like asking for pain because if you have deprecation now, if you upgrade, the deprecation might go away and instead you'll get nothing because the code has been removed. So you won't get the hints. So it's really important just to make sure you're in the perfect state. Upgrade to the latest into 7. Upgrade to the target Java. Make sure you don't use a version override. So you can see here, except for that third-party, real third-party library. What I mean by that is not managed by Spring Boot. You can see this is managed by Spring Boot, so I don't have to provide a version for it. These two. Oh, and by the way, we know why the tests are running now. That's because I'm using H2 for the tests. And I have, therefore, 2 migration scripts here, which is a bit annoying. We'll try to fix that. So test running with H2, production running with Postgres. So we are ready to upgrade, essentially. So what's next? What should we do to upgrade to Spring Boot 3? That's a question. Upgrade the version to which version?
We need to update the JDK to 17.
That's already done, right here.
The latest of the 2.x.
2.7.x. We have to be on that version.
Yeah, we are. What's next now to upgrade to Spring Boot 3?
The Java X dependencies have moved to Jakarta, so
Yeah.
we have to take care of those.
We can't do that yet.
Yeah.
So migrating to Jakarta is one of the big changes in Spring Boot 3. We can't do that until we migrate, of course, which is also a pain because then you have to do everything at once. Okay, so something you should not do is this, right? And countless of times I see the community doing that. So you essentially you're on a version, the latest in the new line is this. Let's just upgrade to the latest and see what happens. Don't do that, never, right? So what you need to do is do things one feature release at a time. And it's very important because each feature release has like release notes and migration guides and everything. And so you can, this one is a big jump with the Jakarta thing. But if you upgrade directly to 3.2, you'll get even more things that may have changed. Okay, so let's have a look to that. All right, my app doesn't compile anymore. Great. I can see that some methods on my Spring Data repository are gone. The reason why they're gone is because like a major upgrade is an opportunity for the team to harmonize things and do changes they couldn't do in a feature release. So in this case, they've decided to split the repository structure a bit more. So if you had this repository, which essentially include paging and sorting, so being able to request a page and being able to sort on the result, It used to be also, it used also to provide CRUD features. Now it does not do so. So if you want both, you essentially have to extend from both interfaces to get the combined set, which is what I'm doing now. Incident long. And I guess I have the same thing with this one. Whoa, okay. So CRUD repository, component long. Let's see if it's happy, seems happy. Let's see if it builds. G, by the way, if you wonder, that's a shortcut for the Gradle wrapper. So I'm tired to type that. And if you're in a subdirectory, it doesn't work. So that script, what it does, it looks in parent directories. And it uses Gradle if it can't find it. Okay, so that works. That was fast. Then the next one is to migrate to the next feature release, right? Again, don't do that. It sounds obvious, but you would be surprised how many people are actually doing this. For some reason, they want to start at the beginning of the line because they think it should be done for some reason. The 9 here is essentially the number of months that we've been working on that line, because Spring Boot releases every month. There is a fixed release cadence. So unless we screw up something, which happens, then we do an extra release out of band. But that's essentially the number of months of feedback that we got from the community, and you don't want to lose that. All right, let's see if it's happy. It's happy. And I know that 3.2.4 is the latest, but I'm not trusting the Wi-Fi, so I haven't had the chance to upgrade to 3.2.4 yet. Not that something bad would happen, right? Okay. So I'm back with my app. It's on the somewhat the latest. That's still the target. You can see that the flyaway warning is gone. So let's have a look to the app. It's still there, still happy. And let's have a look to our first demo. Actual demo and not like boring upgrades. There we go. The demo is not JConsole, right? Nothing more boring than JConsole. What I want to show you is the threading model for this app. So it's a servlet-based application running on Tomcat. Remember I told you about the DumDum high traffic app. So you could see that here actually with the scheduling threads doing like many things for, you know, whatever reason. You see it's increasing because the thread pool has not reached its max size yet. So it's still like taking the opportunity to create a new thread. And you also see the spare threads of Tomcat here, ready to accept like the gigantic amount of incoming requests. So just put that into your mind, even though it's completely untrue for this particular app. But I'm sure you have the use case at some point, and it can be interesting. So you can see the app is using like 60 something threads. And each of those are platform threads, as you know, which means that they map to a thread that's managed by the operating system. And you know those resources are like limited. You can have like as many threads as you want. And each thread is also consuming a bit of memory, and it's not inexpensive to create. Okay? So with all that said, that puts you in a bit in the picture of what I want to show you. And some of you probably know what that is. I want to show you Project Loom. So who knows about Project Loom? Virtual threads? Most of you, if not all of you. Okay. So virtual threads is a feature of the JVM, so nothing to do with Java, even though like Spring has had to do some work to make it friendly for you to use. It's in experimental feature since I don't know when. but it's actually GA since Java 21. Remember that Java 21 is your LTS. Don't make the same mistake with Java 8. It's 17 is not the LTS anymore. It's not. 21 is. And they're still like moving quite rapidly. So if you consider an upgrade, please consider 21. Because the difference between 17 and 21 from a developer perspective, I'm yet to see like something that would break with 21 and does work with 17. I'm sure there is, but it's like super corner case. Okay, so I want to use that. Just make sure. Okay, it's running. Okay, and I'm going to switch right now to 21, otherwise it won't be happy. Did I close the console? I did. Okay, let's restart with 21. No other changes. Let's have a look to. It is so small. Oh boy. Where is it? Okay, it's not there yet. That's why I don't see it. There you go. Okay, so I'm running on 21. Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, we can see the scheduling threads, we can see the execution threads for the HTTP incoming request. You can see it increasing. Okay, so do you need like a short explanation of what virtual threads are? You need to raise your hand if you want an explanation, otherwise I won't do it. Okay? Okay, cool. So you see virtual threads really as how they're named. They're not like platform threads. They have all the characteristics of a thread as you know it as a programmer, but they're not mapped. They're not mapped specifically to one platform thread. So one advantage you have from this is you can create as many virtual threads as you want because they're not mapped physically to a platform thread. And using this infrastructure is really interesting if you have like a lot of I/O, because if you're running something and then you're waiting for some I/O to come back. So let's say you issue an HTTP request to a server, then you have to wait because that server is slow. With this mechanism right now, the thread which is like waiting is still mapped to a platform thread. So it's still using that resource. With virtual threads, what happens is that the JVM will park the virtual threads on the side, and the platform thread that was waiting can be reused to do something else. So it really gives you a nice scalability, pretty much. I shouldn't say for free, because there are a number of things that you need to consider before switching that. And that's also why you see that if you upgrade to 21, there's no auto magic thing in Spring Boot that does enable that, because that would have been the wrong call. You need to opt in for it, right? You need to opt in for it because you need to review your code base, you need to review the libraries that you use to make sure that they will work nicely with virtual threads. One thing that you can consider, just to give you an example of something that's non-obvious, is whatever constraints you have is going to move somewhere else. So let's say I have my 20 threads for the scheduling. By the way, I'm talking 20, but I haven't shown you concretely what I mean by that, although it's not important. So I have like, whoops, that thread pool of 20 threads. Let's imagine that thing is actually issuing a request and then reading like a big JSON file for doing something. So it's consuming quite a bit of memory. But that's okay, because you only have 20 of those, so it's 20 times that amount of memory, so you're not like using too much memory. Now you use virtual threads, that constraint goes away completely. And because you're waiting for things, you can still load JSON files as much as you want to prepare the request or whatever. And so you may very well break your app with an out of memory, because that 20 threads is no longer the constraint. So you need to be careful with this, right? If you tune your thread pool in a way that you limit the amount of traffic, if you use virtual thread, that will go away. The other thing that's worth considering is what's called thread pinning in virtual threads. So thread pinning is when your code is actually using a synchronized block, And then with use a synchronize block, it's actually locking the platform thread, and you can't really escape from that. So you lose the benefit that virtual threads has to offer. So there are many alternatives that you can use. You can use return lock programmatically, which has different features. So there is a way out, but you can't just take a code base, enable virtual threads, and be happy, and it will work just fine. You need to make some work. All right. So how do you opt in for this? Well, that's very easy. You can ask Spring Boot, I want to try this. Let's have a look to what happens when I do. So my app is still working. Let's have a look to what it does. Still round, still happy. I'm guessing it's not there. Well, I can't see it. You can see I have a lot of crap on my machine. It's not supposed to be around, so I have to check for that later. Okay. So if you look at the threads now, you can see that it's behaving differently. You don't get those HTTP pull there anymore. You don't get the pull for the scheduling either, because they've been auto-configured to use virtual threads instead. So that's what I mean by the constraint is gone now. And you can see the number of threads also have decreased. So it also means less memory consumed by the app, and potentially a lot more scalability, because the blocking nature of your use case will not essentially use a thread that won't do anything. It will go back to virtual threads, yes.
That's just the usage of virtual threads by the Spring framework.
So the question is it only the usage of the framework itself? No, because if you look at the thread pool, I haven't shown the code, but it's actually a regular thread pool, and I do have something like this, right? And that used to use a thread pool of 20 threads. Now that's running on a virtual thread now. So anything that we can configure, we'll do it for you. So we'll do it for connection pools, HTTP traffic if we can. It won't work on all web servers. So for instance, Undertow is known to leak memory when you use virtual threads. So be careful with that. We've actually removed the auto configuration for Undertow recently because it was too messy. I mean the auto configuration for virtual threads for Undertow, not the all auto configuration for Undertow, although we are considering that. Yeah, and something that hasn't been auto-configured by Spring Boot as a virtual thread, you can do so programmatically. So we offer the API, and you can do that yourself if you want. Yes.
So those two properties, means they are no longer taken into account.
Yes.
Warnings somehow in the startup.
No, it's actually written in the doc that whenever you use virtual threads, there's no notion of pool, so that whole notion goes away. But there is no exception if you specify the property, because we want to prevent the situation where you want to opt in and keep the pooling if you're not opting it for it or something like that, so that your application doesn't constantly break and you have to remove config.
So for the moment, sometimes you were configuring thread pools with a number of maximum threads. Now you don't have to.
You should not, because that with virtual threads, that's not how you should resonate about the feature, because there is no limitation anymore. And that's what I mean by you have to see where the constraints go, because perhaps you need to constrain things differently now. You're not constrained by the number of platform threads. So if you still have a constraint in terms of what needs to run in parallel, you need to do that in your own code then. Yes?
Not sure I got what you said before. Did you say it covers data source connection pools?
Yes. As far as I know, yes. So anything where there is pooling involved, if we cannot, the outcome is if we can auto-configure something to use virtual threads and it makes sense, the two are important, we will do so. And if you find something that it doesn't do, it might be because we forgot about it, or it might be because we have a good reason for it. And usually if we have a good reason for it, it's mentioned explicitly in the doc.
want to, I don't know, use multiple cores on your CPU or the virtual thread, is there any disadvantage if you use virtual threads that you cannot do it yourself? Or?
So it really shines if you have a lot of I/O. So if you have a lot of like CPU bound thing, don't use it because it won't give you much. It really shines if you have I/O and you have like threads sitting and doing nothing. So it's not for every app, but typically a web app that's producing traffic and looking to a backend, whatever the backend is, database or remote services, it's the sweet spot. Okay, so let's switch with the next demo. What I want to show you is this. So who knows about the REST template? Okay, lots of you. Those who haven't raised their hand, it's like a tricky game now. What do you use to invoke an HTTP server? Don't be shy. Or you can raise your hand if you're using the REST template next time, so then I don't have to ask you. Okay, so nobody said the web client. I'm actually surprised. Who knows about the web client in Spring? Yeah, okay, a few of you. Okay. So since Spring 5, for those of you who've been using that, you know that you have two stacks now. You have the MVC app, the MVC stack, sorry, with servlet-based, Tomcat, and Doto, Jetty. Or you can use Webflux, which is full reactive stack with Netty and a reactive pipeline. And when we did that, we also created a new client called RestClient, which is non-blocking. And we did that because it's impossible with the REST template to invoke remote services in a reactive fashion. We also think that RestClient is really great if you need to reach out to multiple services or you need to do streaming, or those features are really better with a reactive pipeline. But now that we have Loom, it's like it feels a bit strange that REST template, which is 20 years old, with virtual threads, that feels a bit off. So we've decided to actually improve that area. Lots of people actually asking us for a new API with a blocking model, so the REST template API typically. So we did this. I want to show you that. So it's called RestClient. And RestClient can actually be created directly with a REST template if you want to. So the first thing I want to tell you is we've done our best so that this new API is not like going in the way. If you've invested in REST template, if you have like a lot of configuration for converters or default behavior or stuff like that, we try as much as possible to source from the REST template you give us so that you don't have to migrate your config to a new mechanism. If we look at what we had before, so this was the code. Want to set up a bunch of, actually a couple of headers. See, it's a bit clunky. You have to create HTTP headers and an entity, and then the code there is not as what we would like it to be. So let's move it to the new API. So if you've used web client, this should be familiar. So I want to say I want to accept application JSON, and I want a header. Let's copy paste that because I'm lazy. And I want to retrieve something and to entity with this. All right. And we can remove all that. And this is what the code looks like. So if you've used web client in the past, this should look very similar to you. And I do have even a test for it. So let's have a look to see if it still works. Yes. Who knows about that, the REST client test tip? Who knows about this? There's one hand. Wow. Okay. It was interesting because I tried to do that at the JAG and I used the term slice tests and nobody knew about them. until they knew about them. They just didn't know that it was called slice test. So it's a bit funny. Who knows about WebMVC test? Okay, there you go. Webflux test, data JPA test, all that. Okay, those are slice tests. And RestClient test is just one of them. So it's a way for you to test a, way for you to test a web client, essentially. I should say an HTTP client so that it doesn't confuse you. So if we look at it, what we do is we auto-wire the REST template builder, something to mock the server because we don't want to start a server for that. And then you can say, I'm expecting if you call this, just return something. And then you can actually use the client and see if the outcome is what you would expect it to be. As you can see, we've moved everything to RestClient, and that test still works. But we can do better, actually, if you don't want to stay with REST template. REST template isn't going away, by the way. We not like it's been there for so long. It won't be improved because the API is 20 years old, so we don't have any way to make drastic changes to it, which is also the reason why RestClient exists. But if you're using RestClient, you can also move completely to the RestClient Builder API, and Spring Boot will auto configure, so you can inject a builder with what it has discovered. So if you're using Jackson, it will do, the thing you would expect. So it's pay as URL. There we go. Build. And with that, the REST template thing are gone. So you only use the new API. It's not happy. It's not happy because that doesn't compile. Builder. And where's the other one? Oh, it's right there. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you wonder, I will share the link of the demo with you after the talk. So don't worry about it. If you're not following the changes I make, they will be available as one demo per commit as usual, so that you can follow along. Okay, so it works, right? So moving to RestClient. So now one big thing is Java 21, virtual threads, RestClient. So this gives you like a lean servlet-based stack where you can build your application, and with a modern API for the HTTP calls if you need to. By the way, that kind of polish, if I can call it like that, on top of older API is not the only one. If you use JDBC template, also 20 years old, a way for you to invoke JDBC, to query your database using JDBC. There is JDBC client now, same thing. You create it based on a template or a data source, whichever you prefer, and you get this nice new 2024 API, which is a bit better than the template is doing. Yes?
I have a question regarding the Fluent API, because you have the get method, I guess you have the traditional for once.
Yes.
Do you have also the ability to provide one which is not yet standardized?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's exactly like the web client is.
Okay.
We do have like get, post, put, patch, and exchange, I believe. If I'm okay, let's have a look. I can't remember which one it is, but it should be, where am I? So you have method, right?
Oh, okay.
You can provide method, and is there something? That's about it. Yeah. Then you're guided based on to like provide headers and stuff like that.
Okay. So, for example, if I would like to try the search, which is a new proposed, I can do it that way.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
The difference between the REST client and the web client is web client was especially for Spring Webflux, and this one is focused on virtual.
No. So those are totally unrelated. It's been a source of confusion in the community, but you can perfectly use web client with a servlet-based stack if you want to. But the contract you'll get will be this publisher thing, reactive thing. I don't have the time to explain that. So if it's confusing, I'm afraid we'll have to get back that on the side. But essentially, you're not getting the entity if you query it. You get a publisher to the entity. But you can use that in a servlet app. It's perfectly possible to do so. The only difference is if you're on Webflux, publisher is just part of the contract, and the framework will subscribe to those publishers. Whereas if you're using the servlet-based API, you have to actually subscribing by blocking. At some point, you need to block to say, okay, I want to subscribe to this now and wait until I get the result, right? But web client can be used on a servlet-based stack, no problem. This is actually what we try to push the community to, because we feel that for doing HTTP traffic, it's the best solution. Unfortunately, the community does not agree with us, which happens. They just want their blocking model, and they don't want to get bound with publishers and stuff. That's what we've done. But RestClient is limited, right? So if you want to do streaming, it will work, but it will work much better with web client. If you want to contact 3 services and build a POJO that is made out of the 3 replies, if you do that in a declarative fashion, you know that you have to query 1, query 2, query 3, some thread pool somewhere and wait or join or whatever mess you have to do if you want to make sure it runs in parallel. If you use web client, it's just built in. So you say 1, 2, 3, join, or zip, it's called zip. It will all happen like whenever the server has time, and you'll get the output without having to wait or mess with threads. So it depends what kind of programmatic model you want. Okay, I forgot what was the next demo. Yes, okay, good. So what I want to do now is I want to work a bit on those services that I need to start because those are annoying, and I want to show you some of the nice features that have been added recently in that area. So before I do that, who knows about test containers? I'm very happy. Good. So for those of you who don't know about test containers, we'll have a demo soon. See it as Docker for your tests. It's a bit of a shortcut, but you'll see more in the demo. So it's a way for you to start a container as part of your test and provide a nicer API. When you think about, I want to have a Postgres database around, which is what we're going to do. You have to think about many things like, okay, I don't want it to run on the fixed port because that port might be used by something else, or I may have Postgres already running, but I don't want my test to run against it. So I want a random port, so I need an API to know what the random port is, so it's a bit messy. I want to have something that deals with the image for me, all that stuff. Okay, so let's start by adding a couple of dependencies. There we go. So I'm adding the JUnit integration of test containers, and I'm adding, as you can see, you'll see org test containers and then a name. So that's essentially the integration for that, for set technology. So you have MySQL and Elasticsearch and all kinds of things. So if you go to testcontainers.com, you'll see all the containers that it supports. By the way, test containers, I don't have any stock options in test containers, by the way. I like the feature. But just so you know, it's been bought by Docker recently. So now test containers is part of Docker. So okay, with those 2 dependencies added, let me actually close this. So I've stopped the PostgreSQL database I had locally. So it should obviously fail, but whatever. Let's have a look to one of the tests. There we go. So this is also a slice test if you don't know it. Data JDBC test, what it does is configure the data source, configure the repositories, make sure if there is a transaction manager in place, blah, 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 scan the repositories, and then you can focus on data access based tests, which is what I'm doing here. I'm actually injecting the repository and doing a bunch of things on it. So if I run that, it still works because it's using H2. You can see that here. But what I want to do is I want to get rid of H2 completely and yet provide that feature that if you don't have a PostgreSQL database around, it will work. It will just manage the dependencies for you. So first thing I want to do is I want to say I want to use test containers, and if Docker is not around, I want the test to not fail. So that's an option if you want your test to fail if Docker is not around. It's up to you, but I prefer that way. And the next thing is, forget about that for now. So this is really test containers, the test containers API, including this. So essentially it's saying, I want a PostgreSQL container. This is the image that I want. I'm flagging this as a container so that you look at it and you actually do something. And what the do something does is when the test starts, it will look for those fields with container, find the container, start the container. You got it, right? Pretty easy. That is actually to wire things together. So it's like, okay, you have a Postgres database running on port 12452. Great. That's not a reason for Spring Boot to know about it. Spring Boot doesn't know about it. It's just like something started by a third party, so there's no link to it. And so that code is from Spring Boot, and what it does, it link the container to your application, essentially. Okay. The last thing I need to do is I need to tell Spring Boot to not replace my database by H2, which is also a feature that it has. If you find this weird, you are right. And that's also the benefit of preparing a talk, is that you find a bunch of issues. For the little story, actually, I was like wondering why that wasn't working without the annotation and like debugging and, oh, okay, that thing, okay, fine. So I added that to my demo, and I was like coming back to the team saying, you know, that sucks that you have to do this, and should we create an issue? And my colleague told me, yes, we have an issue. You've created it a year ago. So we need to work on that. So in a future release, that will go away, essentially, okay? So let's try again. Okay, still works, but if you look at the logs, you can see that it's connected to Docker. It's like downloading things. You can see the PostgreSQL container here. You can see it has started on a random port, and then we link things together. Let me actually, for the sake of not breaking my build, do the same change. Where is it? Here. Okay. And whoopsie. Too many demos. I think that's it. Yes. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to remove H2 completely. So I'm going to ditch that. And I don't need 2 scripts, but only one. I can remove H2, I can remove Postgres. And I can remove that property, because that property was the one who was like switching from one database to the other. So it's important what I'm showing you here. It's like if you put that infrastructure in place, you have less code to maintain, you have less infrastructure to maintain. It's a bit slower than H2, I agree. But you also are testing against the actual database that your application is using, right? So it's important. Okay, so let's have a look to see if I'm still green. I might not, because of course it's not formatted correctly. Oh, if you don't know about that stuff, we have a project called Spring Java Format that we use internally to format the code consistently. I'm using that in all my demos because I want to make sure that the code looks the same. Unfortunately, it's a bit annoying when you're live coding because the code will not be the same for sure. Okay, so Gradle is happy. My tests are working correctly. Let's start the app again. And of course, it doesn't work because nothing is starting my Postgres database for my app. So what if we had something that starts the app for me, the PostgreSQL database for me when I start the app. Okay, so next demo. Okay, so I do have this. I suppose I don't need to ask who doesn't know about Docker Compose. Who's tired? Okay. So if you don't know about Docker Compose, please say so now, but I'm assuming that you do know about it. So I have a Compose YAML file, or it's also called Docker Compose. Don't get confused if it's not called Docker Compose. There's like 2 patterns that are valid. And you can have YAML with an A or YAML without an A, whatever. So I'm using Compose. I don't know why. I think some colleague told me to do so. And let's start the app again. And of course, it doesn't work because like it's not that magic. But Spring Boot also brings a nice feature, which is, as you would expect, Docker Compose support for Spring Boot. Okay, you can see I'm adding that as dev only. So it's very important to understand that it's really a development feature. It's not something that you need to mess around. It's not going to be shipped in the app, and it should not anyway. And there we go. Postgres starting, my app starting. And even though I don't have like any specific settings on my machine, I do have my app working. Yes?
Does it start the database on a random port or a
No.
fixed port?
No, it's really running Docker Compose as you would run Docker Compose yourself. If services have been started already, right? You have run Docker Compose app yourself elsewhere, we will detect that and won't attempt to start it, right? So it's trying to do the smart thing. If you have like multiple applications using the same Docker Compose file, you can also use this. You need a little bit more config. You have to say, my Docker Compose file is there. You start your 5 apps. The first app that starts will do what's necessary to start Docker Compose, and the rest will start on those services. Okay? Good, it's great. So I lied to you. Not that it's great, but I lied to you. Actually, you can do this with Spring Boot 2.7 if you want to. Okay? I'm not supposed to tell you that because I'm supposed to tell you you have to upgrade, but you should, by the way. It's out of open source support in case you wonder. So it's not supported anymore, Spring Boot 2. So if you have a CVE, it's problematic, right? So take that into account. But that you can do with Spring Boot 2.7. Okay? So I want to show you if you upgrade what happens. So if you upgrade, where am I? Yes, you guess it right. There's a Testcontainers support for Spring Boot. And what it does, it provides a more integrated, if you will, story with Testcontainers, where you can remove all of that and just use this. So service connection is a new abstraction that we've added in Spring Boot 3.1, I believe. What it does, it's essentially saying connect to that thing. And the implementation behind that can look at the field, realize what kind of container it is, realize it's a database, and infer automatically the 3 properties that you need to set. So let's have a look to that. Okay, it works. Nice. It works for database, but it also works for any kind of services that we know about. So anything that we can detect and we can provide a configuration, we will do so. And for things that we cannot detect, as always with Spring, you have an API. You can implement the API yourself. So you could provide an implementation for whatever fancy connector, fancy container that you have within your company, and just stick service container on it, a service connection on it, And as long as your implementation is on the class path, we will call you, and you'll get a chance to do the right thing. There was a question. Yes.
In case you have multiple databases you want to connect to.
Yeah, I love that. I got the exact same question like last week. So tell me, does Spring Boot auto-configure multiple databases?
Well, you can define properties, prefix, and then it can inject those.
Right, but does Spring Boot?
By default, no.
Okay, so that's the answer.
Okay.
The answer is if you use service connection,
Yeah.
it will connect the primary data source, but it won't go further than that because but what you could do, of course,
Then
is you can implement your thing that knows about your prefix and knows about which data source it is. Yes.
Okay. Would have been cool to keep the name of that database prefix or name that you've given under data source, so that you know, okay, it's for that data source.
But we can't do that consistently because we do not auto-configure multiple databases.
Yeah.
So if it makes no sense to provide that feature if we don't provide the basic feature. But the answer related to what you said is there's a strong desire to add that finally to Spring Boot, like auto-configurations of multiple databases or multiple X based on a name. And that name will come back to the annotation, of course. That's how it would be implemented. Okay, so you need Spring Boot 3 for that. So if you want to type dynamic property source and properties by hand, stay with 2x, but don't do that. This is so much better, right? So please upgrade. Okay, so next up, right. So what we've done is, and it's a bit of a fake, kind of a fake affair here, but whatever, just to show you the feature, see what if you find that useful. So if you use TLS SSL, you know that there are like many places in Spring Boot that you can configure that, which is a bit annoying because if you have like a single certificate that needs to be applied on multiple services, you have to repeat that over and over again, which is a bit annoying. So what Spring Boot 3 provides is this notion of SSL bundle. So this is the name of the bundle, and then you provide your configuration. And rather than having to copy-paste that around for the services that needs SSL or TLS, you just provide the name of the bundle and it will work automatically. So let's have a look to an example. So I wanted to say first, change the port there, example.org, there we go. And I have a script somewhere. There we go. So I have a script to show you another feature that's quite interesting, is to reload certificates when they change on the file system. So if you need to rotate your certificates, Spring Boot supports that now. So you can see the certificates. I'm going to show you the code after. Let's update the certificates. Okay. And wait for Spring Boot to catch up. I'm not going to show you the app itself because then it's boring because Firefox is screaming at you that you're not supposed to do this and it's no fun. All right. So the new certificate is ending by this. Yep. So you can see it has changed. The reason why I did that is because I provided the path to the file system, to the certificates, and I requested that to reload on update. Okay, so that's a new feature that you get. If you use SSL, it's quite handy because now you just provide a bundle in so many places that you need to use it rather than having to configure it every time. Okay, let's check out that, because it's too much code. So I want to briefly talk to you about observability. Who's using an observability platform for their app at the moment? Datadog, Grafana, Prometheus, all that stuff. Okay, a bit. Who's using distributed tracing? Who knows what it is? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so if you distributed tracing, for those who don't know what it is, very simply, I should say, is let's say you have an application that's made out of 3 services. I won't say microservices because I hate the word, so that's the only time I'm saying that word today. But let's say you have 3 services, and the first service calls the second service, and the second service needs to talk to a database, for instance, right? So you get a request on service A, it's calling service B on HTTP, service B is calling a database, and then you get back the answer, whatever. Or maybe one is calling 2 and 3, it doesn't matter. Distributed tracing is this mechanism where when you have a request, a higher level request, so from the user point of view, you would like to see that request flowing by on those services and be able to track it, to see what it does, right? If something goes wrong, usually when an infrastructure like that, if you don't have tools, you don't really know what happened. It's slow, but why is it slow? Maybe it's the first service that's slow, the second one, or the database. And so distributed tracing is a way for you to monitor a sample, essentially, your application and get some insights. With Spring, it was done with a project called Spring Cloud Sleuth. Who knows about Spring Cloud Sleuth? The same hands, wonderful. Which is a project outside of Spring Boot. So what we've decided to do with Spring Boot 3 is to completely revisit the observability story, include distributed traces in in Spring Boot itself, and make that a little bit more consistent. So the commit I've added, it's a bit like doing a bunch of things. So that's why I didn't live code with you, but again, you'll be able to play with it after the talk. So I have a number of new images. So I have like Prometheus, which is running on the standard port. Who doesn't know about Prometheus? Doesn't? A few, okay. So see that Prometheus as like some services, which is like scrapping your app. So it's like calling your app every 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and asking about its state. Tell me about how you behave, tell me about metrics, essentially. And it stores that into a very optimized database. Then you can build dashboards on top of it. Grafana is the thing where you can build those dashboards. It has support for multiple data sources, namely Prometheus. So that's where you play with it. Who doesn't know about Zipkin? Okay. Some of you are already too tired, I can see. They don't know about distributed tracing, but apparently they do know about Zipkin, which is strange. So Zipkin is the thing that essentially has this mechanism to store distributed traces and provide you a high-level search API on top of it. So I'm essentially starting those 3 services. Let's have a look to Prometheus. So Prometheus, what it does, it's actually scraping our app. So Spring Boot has support for Prometheus for a long time. It's actually scrapping, getting metrics from it. And then the Grafana thing, the only thing it does, it's configuring the Prometheus data source, just as like making that convenient for you. All right. If I look to the configuration, though, there's a bit of changes there. So new changes. One is I'm giving a name to my app. It's very important because that's how you identify if you have like a dashboard with like 20 you-know-what services. It would be interesting to know where the information comes from. And so one good way to do this is to name your app, because Spring Boot will automatically tag the metric with the name of the app. Which is what I'm doing here for some reason. I don't know if it's done automatically or if it's new. I'll have to check. I'm asking tracing to sample everything, because when you're doing a demo, you don't want 10% of your request to be traced. You want everything to be traced so that you can actually see exactly what's happening. And I'm exporting like metrics every 5 seconds, because again, when you do a demo and you change something, you don't want to wait. But those settings are not like what you would have for a production app. Okay, so where is my, there we go. Okay, I have my app running. Let's have a look. Okay, cool. So first thing is, let's have a look to Grafana. So I don't have anything on Grafana. The only thing I have, is the data source, as I told you, to Prometheus. So just for the demo thing, it's not very important because that's not new, but go away, that's not what I want to do. All right, boy. Dashboards, create dashboards, import dashboards. Give me that, thank you. Spring Boot, you want a Prometheus data source? Yes, there we go. So Grafana, has this notion of public dashboard, so you can craft a dashboard, publish it to Grafana, and it shows on the. It's like an Apple store for dashboards if you want to. And I kept like the idea of a dashboard, and just to give you a sense of what you could do. Again, that's not new. So if you use Spring Boot 2, you have all of that. All the metrics bit is working exactly the same as before. Probably in a more like coordinated fashion. What's interesting is, what's the Zipkin thing again? Compose. Nobody knows the port of Zipkin? Okay. Thank you for nothing. All right, so those are your traces. You see here a trace that's called task availability checker and check component. So if I look at that, I can see it's doing a number of things. So if you wonder what that is, remember I showed you a schedule task that runs every 5 seconds. Let's have a look again for those in the back that arrived late. I have your names. So, where is it? Availability checker. No. Oh boy. Sorry. Bear with me. I will find it. Yes. So it's looping over the components, like calling my fake mock thing, and then collecting the availability and then saving them to the database. And that's what you see here, right? Okay. Here you could see that one request was really much more slower than the other ones. And if I click on it, then I can see that it's for the monitoring and analytics, if you can see that. Let's have a look here. It's 503, and that's the one here that is broken, okay? So demo again, if you query for something that's down, it's slower, don't ask me. But the nice thing that you could see is without any configuration whatsoever, you got that as an outcome. Why did you get that as an outcome? Is because the REST client or the REST template or the web client, whatever you choose to use, is automatically instrumented by Spring Boot. So if you use that stuff, it will automatically participate into the observation context. Yes?
Maybe you're going to answer this soon, but can you include the repository call to show up in that?
So yes and no. The problem that we have with, the answer is yes. The long answer is not automatically. If you're talking about a database, you need to instrument the data source to provide accurate results. And we haven't made up our mind about what technology we want to use to wrap the data source. There's a few around, but we're not convinced that they're mature enough for us to automatically include. But you can do so, and if you look at the doc, there are even reference, so you can give it a try. Yes?
So all the requests are shown in one request because of some correlation?
So there is not really a correlation here, but if you look at this code, this starts an observation, right? The observation starts when you schedule something. Check components is the name. You could find that here. And then whatever is done within that invocation is automatically, that and anything else that we support is automatically handled. So you could see that the total time of that, the total time of this is 3 seconds something, and you could see the individual element.
Because I suppose that some information is transported in the HTTP request.
No, because it's nothing to do with the server here. It's the HTTP client.
Mm.
That's HTTP client behavior. So you're still within that method. It's not magic.
Okay.
But if you had called something that was also a backend that was using Spring with the same thing, calling the same service, you would see the decomposition, of course. Yes. Because whenever the client is issuing the request, it will automatically pass what we call a span ID. The ID will be received on the server, will be completely discarded if it doesn't use Spring, but if it does use Spring and is configured to use tracing, then it will participate in that and report span detail.
Okay. And you can eventually configure because maybe something else before has given that ID or not.
Sure, yeah. So as you could see here, it won't happen, but if you are being called by something that has a running observation, it will participate in the observation. It will not create a new one. And you can also create your own observation, so there's an API for that. You could create an observation and call observe. You get a Lambda callback, and that whatever you do in the Lambda is part of the observation, etc., etc., etc. Yes?
Did you have to add a starter or dependencies for that?
Very good. Thank you, because I forgot to show it. Nothing really funky. I added this. So essentially, I'm saying this is my observability stack. Everything happens with the actuator. So I had the actuator before, I believe. So you basically choose your registry for metrics. You're saying I want to publish metrics to Prometheus. You're saying I want to use distributed tracing, and I want to use the Zipkin with the Brave format. If you want to use a different format, as you can see, that's all Macrometer and a bit of Zipkin detail, but it's Macrometer everything. We're not messing with that, which is good because Macrometer adds support for other observability platform, and we just integrate with that. Okay.
Wasn't there some open telemetry stuff?
What was the question about open telemetry?
I thought it was established, actually.
It's not. It's a bit of a mess, if you want my opinion. So if you want to export OpenTelemetry, you can. Macrometer, as you probably know, is like some kind of facade on top of metric system. So it's a bit like SLF4j, if you like. So you're coding against a single API, and then if you export that, that's why actually the only thing that's really Prometheus specific is the dependency. There is nothing in the code that's in your code that's Prometheus specific. Everything is done transparently for you. And if you don't like Prometheus, you want to go to Datadog, you change the dependency and it will publish to Datadog. So that's basically what Macrometer does for you. And it does the same thing for OpenTelemetry. So if you really insist on publishing with their broken format, then you can do that, yes. I hope there is no fan of OpenTelemetry in the room. It's recorded, shit. I forgot it's recorded. I take it back. I didn't say anything.
So it generates the trace ID automatically, or we have to supply somehow the correlation ID?
Everything that you've seen is all the code that has changed. So there is no code that I had to write to create trace ID or provide trace ID or whatever. You could see also that the log has changed to include this. The idea is, of course, to facilitate if you're sending your logs to a data lake or whatever infrastructure you have in place, the default log format will include the application name. And for things where there is an observation that's actually active, which you don't see on startup, you'll see the trace ID in the logs too. So that's the thing here that's empty. So if you want to link your request both on multiple services with distributed traces and getting your logs, you'll get that out of the box without doing anything, because Spring Boot will include the application name and the trace ID. Cool. Okay. So I have one more demo for you, and then I'm going to sleep a bit.
Not
Okay.
right now.
Not right now, no. I'm just checking if I haven't forgot anything. No. Okay, so I want to talk to you a bit about performance. And before I do that, I need to upgrade my app very quickly to Spring Boot 3.3. Okay, I haven't done that yet, so if it breaks. Oh, by the way, I'm on the Mac that doesn't work with Java apparently. So if something breaks, it's not my fault, right? What was the thing they told me to change? Okay, I need the scratch pad because I forgot. Yes, that. Flyway has changed something, so it has like separate modules for database support now. Okay, so let's have a look. Maven style. Okay, great. Let's start the app. Oh, I should maybe Docker compose it first. Thank you. So if you want to start an app with Spring Boot, you know that you can... why is it messing? Why is it messing with me? The autocomplete is like, I don't know why. Something broke recently. Strange. Oh, that's because I'm using Gradle, okay. Sorry. So you know you can start an app with that, right? Everybody knows that. Okay, so my app is starting. As you can see, like around 1.7 seconds or something like that. Did you know that it's not the recommended way to start a Spring Boot app in production? Who knows about this? Nobody. Yes. So the reason why it's not recommended is the repackage archive is really a way for you to easily start the app, to share the app if you want to. But usually what you would do is you would run a container for your app using build packs or whatever Docker infrastructure you've put in place. But starting the app as a repackage archive is not really a good idea because all the jars are within jars. Sorry, the repackage jars contains nested jars, and reading that from the archive is a bit costly. Right, so let's try to fix that. And before I do, I want to ask, who knows about CDS or AppCDS? You don't count. I have like one and one maybe. So you have to play the game now. I won't ask anything, I promise. Who knows about AppCDS or CDS or heard about it? Interesting. The same hands. Okay. So AppCDS is there since Java 9, believe it or not. So it's something that the platform team, the Java platform team at Oracle, they've built to reduce the memory consumption of applications that are starting with several instances, or at least that's what they've done with Java 9. Giving you a short explanation of what it does. You have an app. You need to start the same app 20 times. You know that classes are in the permission space, and that takes a bit of space, right? So you start the app once, but just the startup phase, and you stop it immediately. And you save the classes in a cache, okay? Then you share the cache, and then when you start the 20 instances, you provide a reference to the cache, and that will not only speed up a bit a startup time, but it will prevent permission space to be used in all those 20 instances. Okay, that's a bit the idea. That's what they've done with Java 9, and apparently nobody cared. Oh, it's recorded again. It didn't really work very well, apparently, and so they've decided to switch a bit. So that was called AppCDS back then, for class data store, I believe. Data share, thank you. They've decided to move to really focusing on optimizing startup time of the app. So same mechanism, you do what they call a training run. So you start the app, you stop it immediately, you get a cache, you start the app again, and it starts faster. So let's have a look to that. I want to say something is, so we've been working with them. It was very, very fun spending time with them and seeing how that story can land. And while we've been working on this, we've noticed significant changes between Java 17 and 21. So they're still actively working on that, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about what's next. Okay, so I still have my app. Sorry, I'm going to move that a bit, maybe here so that you can see. I'm going to say Java Tools. I believe that's the name. Yes. So that's what's new in Spring Boot 3.3. The latest milestones that's released last Thursday. So you're on the bleeding edge now. I did the demo with a snapshot last time. So, okay. I have these options where I can choose to extract the app. And if I'm asking for help for extract, I'm basically getting like some information. So I'm going to say destination build app. Let's have a look to build app. So if I look at build app, I'm getting a directory with lib and my libraries and a jar file at the root. Okay. So let's do that. So if I'm doing this, I can see my 1.7 became 1.4, which is quite interesting. If you look at the time if you start the app very, very often, that can be quite interesting. So this is the recommended way to start an app in production. Like you extract it. If you're not using Spring Boot 3.3 M3, you can't really in production. Although we know that people are using milestones in production, but don't do that. In 2.7, what you would do, you would extract the repackage archive and then run the launcher. There is doc on a website if you want to know how to do it. Here, what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide you a structure that's a bit more friendly and basically talk about that use case because there is a gain in doing so. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to show you CDS. Getting back to my little thing here. Okay, so I just did what they call a training run, which is like starting the app, stopping the app, and let the JVM create the cache. So if we look at the cache, it's right here. Okay. Let me show you the command line again, so that there is no question about what it does. So the first one, the XX thing, it's actually asking the JVM to store the cache when it shuts down. And the second option is how Spring Framework essentially integrates with the feature. So it's putting the app in a certain life cycle where it stops when it has done, like it's in its life cycle essentially. Okay. And before it starts servicing requests and stuff like that, which is quite important. So we have the archive now. So let's use it. So if you want to use it, there is only one extra option to provide. Again, nothing to do with Spring. I just want to be very clear. I'm giving the path to the cache. and then if I do this, then I'm sub-second. Okay, so I'm gaining quite a bit. What I want to emphasize on this is you don't have to change code to achieve that. Okay, so there is nothing that CDS asks you to change. If the cache at some point became invalid, the JVM will find out like any other like source of ClassPass that can be invalid. So if it can't find what it needs in the cache, it will load it from the jar. It's not like you get rid of the ClassPass entirely and you use only the cache. It's really meant to be an optimized version of your application ClassPass essentially. So it's a quick win for you. I just want you to be aware of that. No change whatsoever. Give it a try. You do the training run. There's a bit more disk space, obviously, but it can be quite interesting. You had a question.
The GSA file is machine dependent?
Yes, so very good question. So that file thing, what can I do with it? So CDS is, as far as I know, very picky about a number of things, which is the reason why we had to work with them and create that extract format I showed you. This may be inaccurate, so I'm being careful now that I remember it's recorded. One, you need to run it with the exact same JVM. So if you up to the backfix level for some cases, so it has to be the same JVM, the one that produces the file and the one that runs the app with the file. You can't run the app with a ClassPass that changes, then it will bust the cache. You can't run the app with a ClassPass whose order of the libraries change. That's why we put this in place. That's why you do -jar something, because we set up the ClassPass for you and it's always the same so that it matches the training run and the run. And you can't use directories. So if you use directories with classes in it, so exploded class directory, if you will, CDS doesn't like that and will bust the cache. So it won't be like totally off, but we've been doing like quite a bit of research, and the benefit that you get are lowered quite a bit. So the cache hit is much lower if you use this. Yes.
So it stops before having the application starting to making new connections and so it could be also integrated in a CI/CD.
That's how it's supposed to be used. Yes.
How does it compare to Crack?
It does not. So who knows about Crack before I started answering that question? Not the drug, by the way, if you. Not a lot of you. So okay, so you have like the cool kits right now, depending on cool, depends on your taste. You have native images like GraalVM. You have CDS and you have Crack. So native images, very quickly, take the app, static analysis at build time, like do tree shaking, whatever, generate an executable that starts in a few milliseconds, okay, and use much less memory, but it has constraints like, I'm not going to go there because it's too much stuff, but it has some constraints. Crack is essentially, see it as doing a snapshot of your application. So you have an application running, it takes a snapshot of the app, save that to a file, and then you start the app again and it uses the snapshot to resume the app. So the app startups again very fast, also in the around of couple of 100 milliseconds. It's in the same ballpark between native and Crack, but they are like constraints. They're not the same, but a number of constraints. CDS does not have any of that in terms of constraints, but as you can see, it does not start in a few milliseconds. So that would be why you can't really compare them. But CDS is, to me, the quick win definitely is that. And the other thing I want to tell you is, who knows about Project Leyden? I have 2.5. you're the halves often, I can see. You're not very sure, but maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Okay, so Project Leyden is, I don't know if it has a target JDK yet. I don't think so. So it's still like very research development. It's like CDS on steroids. So it's like taking the approach that I've just shown you, but putting more things in the cache. So starting to cache like lambdas, for instance, starting to do like build time optimizations, a bit like native does, but in a different fashion, to achieve somewhat the same ballpark as native and crack, but with different constraints. Essentially, that's the idea. And so when Leyden will land, then we can compare it to crack. Right now, we really can't. Yes?
Do you have any idea when you have a big application which has many components which might not be immediately used at startup, whether AppCDS is worth it or if it's better to use lazy initialization?
Sorry, I'm not sure I got your question. So if you have like many components, that
if you have many components into your application, for example, you have parts which are batches and things like that, which will run only in the evening and things like that, and you have the HTTP request, and you can do lazy initialization and lazy auto wiring, which means usually the application will start faster. When is it a good moment to switch to AppCDS versus the lazy initialization, which has its own drawback?
I see. So even if you look at the using lazy extensively to start a Spring-based application, there is a foundation that's necessary to bootstrap the framework. And right now, that foundation is so that CDS always win in those cases. The only question is, do you want to do you want to take the burden of actually doing the training run and storing the cache? That's the only thing you need to consider. If you look at the startup phase for an application, most of the cost is class loading. When you need to really optimize its class loading, and CDS is actually addressing that. So this is the app.
One last small question about
Sure.
optimization.
Yes.
Would you have win the same amount of time if you did the wrong way of running the app without packaging before with CDS?
So if I got your question is if I did a training run on the repackage archive, that's your question? Very good. So the question is, okay, what if I have the training run on the full archive, the one that I had before extracting, what would happen? And the answer is the cache would not be as efficient, definitely, which is the reason why we did this, because it wasn't working properly. The reason why it's not working properly is, I don't know if you know this, but when you do java-jar with a repackage archive, it's actually starting a bootloader, a Spring Boot bootloader, if I can call it like that, which knows about the nested jar within the archive. That's how it works, right? And the bootloader uses a class loader for that, and CDS doesn't like it because it's like custom code it doesn't know about, which is why we did this. So first of all is, irrespective of this, extracting the repackage archive to run the app is the recommended approach. If you use build pack with a container, that's exactly what it's going to do. So if you have like entry point java-jar with the jar in your Docker images, if you have Docker images, that's one thing that you should probably change to optimize things a bit. And then irrespective of that, it's the extract phase that we have in Spring Boot 3.3 is CDS friendly. We'll talk about that soon. I think there is a blog post in the way. I should also mention I'm not going to go to the bar thing. So if you have questions that I need to answer, that's now. Any more questions?
When is the release of 3.3 scheduled?
So when is the release of 3.3? So it's an interesting question. I don't know if you know this, but Spring Boot has a well-defined release cadence. So if you look at how it works, you can predict what 3.3 is going to be and 3.4 and 3.5 if there is a 3.5. So we do release every 6 months, a feature release. And we do release in May. Is it May? Yes, May and November. Okay. And we do release the next Thursday after the 3rd Monday of the month. So that sounds complex, but it's not. Wait. We have a release train. The release train kicks off the 3rd Monday of the month with micrometer, reactor, everything that Spring Framework needs, Spring Framework. And then a Spring Boot arrives last. So that's why there's this gap between the... And so every project, if you look at it, they release exactly the same day. If you want to know exactly the date because you can't be bothered to compute, calendar.spring.io. I'll show you that now. It gives you an overview of this. So this is the 3rd. Is it the 3rd Monday or the 2nd Monday? Oh, the doc is wrong. It's the 2nd Monday, and you can see the 3rd Thursday is Spring Boot. So to answer your question, it's, when are we? That should be May. It's actually May the 3rd day of May. Yes.
Spring, I try to remember the name of the API for a client, RestClient, or is it web client? Is it how does it interact with? How does it integrate with mechanism like Spring Retry? You see, because it's nice to.
If you have questions that are completely unrelated, let's give a chance to the audience to ask questions that are related to this, and we can discuss it fine. Yes.
As you have said, we should not run Java minus jar the package archive in the production. So how should, can you please just put in some more light? How should we run it?
I just showed you, and if you're not using Spring Boot 3.3 M3, you can't because you should not. It's all written in the doc. So you look at the reference guide, there is a section about efficient deployment, and it explains what you need to do. Essentially, you extract the jar like physically.
Okay.
You do unzip the jar file, then you get the structure, and there is a command to run the app. I'm going to take your question offline because it's very specific.
Yes.
The answer is you don't, by the way. Because of reactor, and then we'll start like with a 20 minutes discussion as to why. Yes?
RestClient can be used with WebFlux as well as SPT?
No, the other way around that doesn't work, because if you have like a full reactive pipeline, you really need to be reactive end-to-end, otherwise like you're losing the benefit. So you have to use the web client. It would be completely strange to use a blocking model in a non-blocking infrastructure. But the reverse is true. If you have like a non-blocking infrastructure, you can use something, sorry, if you have a blocking infrastructure, you can use something that's non-blocking, but at any time you can block, and it's going to do what the code does anyway without it. Yeah. If you have more questions, this is my email. I'm snicol on X, snicol on GitHub. So feel free to look around and ask questions. Thank you.